The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide like a metal valley under the artificial stars. 12 different alien species sat in their special seats, each designed for their unique bodies. The air hummed with translation devices, working hard to turn thoughts into words that everyone could understand. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood alone at the center of it all. His black suit looked simple compared to the flowing robes and shining armor worn by the other representatives. He kept his hands at his sides and his face calm, even though he knew what was coming. Chancellor Vextar rose from his seat high above the floor. His 4 eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, and his long arms gestured toward Morrison. The Chancellor belonged to the Hegemony, one of the oldest and most powerful groups in the galaxy. They had ruled space lanes for thousands of years before. Humans even learned to make fire. "We are here today to judge the actions of humanity," Vextar said. His voice carried through the chamber without any emotion. "In the 20 years since they joined our council, they have broken our most sacred laws again and again." Morrison watched as a holographic display appeared above his head. Images of human ships, human colonies, and human faces filled the air. Each picture showed what the council called crimes. But Morrison saw something different. He saw his people trying to help others. "The first charge," Vextar continued, "is violation of the non-interference protocols. Humans have made contact with 17 primitive species without council approval. They shared technology and knowledge that these species were not ready to receive. The display showed human doctors working in alien hospitals, human engineers, building water treatment plants on desert worlds, and human teachers showing children of different species how to read. Morrison remembered each of these missions. Earth had sent help because people were dying, not because they wanted to break rules. The second charge is unauthorized colonization. Humans have established settlements in 43 star systems that were marked as restricted zones. More images filled the air. This time they showed human families building homes on empty planets, human farmers growing food in alien soil, and human children playing with alien children under foreign suns. What the Chancellor did not mention was that these restricted zones were empty because other species had been forced to leave them. The Hegemony had pushed out smaller groups to make room for their own expansion. "The third and most serious charge," Vextar said, his voice growing harder, "is the sharing of advanced technology with pre-spaceflight civilizations. This violation of our most fundamental law has disrupted the natural development of dozens of species." Morrison almost laughed at that one. The natural development the Chancellor talked about usually meant watching species destroy themselves while the Council did nothing. Humans had given earthquake prediction technology to the Kepler colony just before massive tremors would have killed millions. They had shared medical knowledge with the Vegan worlds when a plague threatened to wipe out entire cities. Each time the Council had said to wait and observe. These actions show that humanity cannot follow the careful balance that keeps our galaxy peaceful, Vextar declared. They act without thinking. They break rules without permission. They put their emotions before our wisdom. Around the chamber, representatives from other species nodded their agreement. The insect-like hierarchy clicked their approval with sharp sounds. The floating observers pulsed with satisfied colors. The mechanical collective hummed in harmony. Arbiter Quinn Dahl stood next. She was the head judge of the council, chosen for her fairness and wisdom. Her people, the Serenity, were known for their calm decisions and long thoughts. She had silver skin that seemed to glow in the chamber's light. "Jake Morrison of Earth," she said. Her voice like music played on crystal. "You may speak in defense of your species before we announce our decision." Morrison stepped forward. He had prepared a long speech about human achievements and peaceful intentions. He had planned to talk about the millions of lives his people had saved and the dozens of wars they had prevented. But looking up at the faces around him, he realized that none of it would matter. These beings had already decided. They saw humans as dangerous because humans cared more about helping others than following rules. They feared humanity not because humans were violent, but because humans made other species ask why the Council did so little to help the suffering they could easily prevent. "We came here 20 years ago hoping to learn from older and wiser species," Morrison said. His voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. "We wanted to find our place among the stars and prove that we deserve to sit with you." He paused and looked around at the assembled representatives. "We made mistakes. We moved too fast sometimes. We helped people when you told us to wait. We saved lives when you told us to observe. If caring too much about others is our greatest fault, then we accept that judgment." Morrison straightened his shoulders. "But we do not apologize for choosing to act when action could prevent suffering. We do not regret sharing knowledge that saved worlds. We are not sorry for building homes for those who had none." The chamber fell completely quiet. Even the humming of the translation devices seemed to fade. Arbiter Quindal nodded slowly. "The Council has reached its decision," she announced. "After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, we find humanity guilty of all charges." Morrison felt his heart sink, but he kept his face steady. "Therefore," Quindal continued, "humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human vessels, stations, and personnel must withdraw from Council space within one standard cycle. All trade agreements between humanity and Council members are terminated immediately. No human ship may enter Council territory without special permission." The chamber erupted in sounds of satisfaction from some species and worried murmurs from others. A few representatives looked uncomfortable with the harsh sentence, but none spoke against it. Morrison stood alone in the center of the great chamber as the noise swirled around him. 20 years of careful diplomacy, of building relationships, of proving human worth, had just ended. His people were being cast out like criminals. He turned slowly and began walking toward the massive doors that led out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the growing quiet as other representatives realized he was leaving. Just as he reached the doors, Morrison stopped and turned back. "We understand the Council's position," he said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. "You have made your choice, and we will respect it." He paused for a moment, looking up at the faces that had just rejected everything his species had tried to build. "We came here hoping to learn from you," Morrison said quietly. "Instead, we learned something far more valuable. We learned what we never want to become." Then he turned and walked through the great doors. They closed behind him with a deep, final sound that seemed to echo through the chamber long after he was gone. The representatives sat in uncomfortable silence. Chancellor Vextar had gotten exactly what he wanted, but somehow victory felt hollow. In the quiet that followed, many began to wonder if they had just made a terrible mistake. Captain Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of her exploration ship New Horizon when the message came through. The red priority signal flashed on her main screen, and she knew before reading it that everything was about to change. Around her, 37 crew members worked at their stations, monitoring the deep space sensors as they mapped unknown star systems on the galaxy's edge. "All human vessels are ordered to return to Sol space immediately," she read aloud from the official transmission. "By order of Earth Command, no exceptions will be made. Departure from Council territory must be completed within one standard cycle." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Lieutenant Commander Ben Walsh, her first officer, looked up from his navigation console with confusion written across his face. They had been exploring peacefully for months, making contact with new species and charting safe passage routes through dangerous nebulae. "Captain," Walsh said carefully, "we're receiving multiple distress calls from the Kepler mining colony. The Thraxians are reporting massive seismic activity. Their geological surveys show the entire planet is becoming unstable. Brooks felt her stomach tighten. The Thraxians had never been friendly to humans, but they had never been hostile either. They simply preferred to keep to themselves and handle their own problems. Now their mining operation on Kepler 442b was in serious danger, and the closest rescue ships were human vessels. "What's the estimated time until planetary evacuation becomes necessary?" she asked. Walsh checked his readings twice before answering. 6 hours, maybe less. The underground mining tunnels are collapsing faster than their engineers expected. They have 40,000 workers down there with limited escape routes. Brooks stared at the star charts displayed on her screen. Following orders meant turning away from people who needed help. Disobeying orders meant risking court-martial and ending her career. But 40,000 lives hung in the balance, and she was the only captain in range who could make a difference. Set course for Kepler 442b, she decided. Maximum warp speed. Her communications officer, Ensign Gary Peterson, turned in his chair. "Captain, should I notify Earth Command of our delay?" "No," Brooks said firmly. "We'll deal with the consequences later. Right now, we have people to save." Similar conversations were happening on human ships throughout Council space. Commander Ryan Torres received orders to abandon his medical supply, run to the plague-stricken vegan colonies, but he continued anyway. The medicine in his cargo hold would save thousands of lives, and no regulation was worth letting people die. Captain Nicole Davis ignored her recall orders while pursuing pirates who had attacked a civilian transport. The merchant vessel carried families fleeing war zones, and she refused to let criminals profit from their desperation. Her patrol ship Defender tracked the pirates through 3 star systems before finally cornering them near an asteroid field. On the massive orbital station New Geneva, Admiral Frank Hamilton coordinated the largest peaceful withdrawal in galactic history. His office walls displayed screens showing the locations of every human ship, station, and colony throughout Council space. Red markers indicated vessels that had already begun their journey home, while yellow markers showed those still completing final missions. "Sir," reported his aide, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, "we have confirmed departure schedules for all major installations. The civilian population is cooperating fully, but we're receiving hundreds of requests for asylum from non-human residents." Hamilton studied the numbers scrolling across his displays. 200 million humans lived and worked throughout Council space. They had built homes, started businesses, formed friendships, and created lives far from Earth. Now they were packing everything they could carry and saying goodbye to the only homes many of their children had ever known. "What kind of asylum requests?" he asked. Rodriguez pulled up a detailed report. Mostly vegan refugees who found sanctuary in human colonies after their government collapsed. Also Thraxian scientists who were working on joint research projects. Some collective dissidents who left their homeworld to study human democracy, and about 3,000 hegemony citizens who married into human families. The Admiral was not surprised. Human space had always welcomed anyone willing to contribute to society and respect basic rights. Many alien species had found opportunities and acceptance among humans that their own governments denied them. Now these beings faced a terrible choice between staying with their adopted communities or remaining in their birth territories. "Grant asylum to anyone who wants to come with us," Hamilton decided. "Anyone who chooses to leave with humanity is welcome in human space." Rodriguez made notes on her tablet. "Sir, the council representatives are claiming we're stealing their citizens." "We're not stealing anyone," Hamilton replied. "We're offering freedom of choice, which seems to be a foreign concept to them." On the agricultural world of Ceres Prime, Governor Paul Mitchell watched through his office window as the last human transport ships loaded passengers and cargo. The planet had been a model of cooperation between 5 different species, with each group contributing their unique skills to build a thriving society. Human engineers had designed the atmospheric processors, vegan farmers had developed new crop varieties, Thraxian miners had extracted rare minerals, Collective researchers had studied the planet's ecosystem, and hegemony artists had created beautiful cities. Now the delicate balance was falling apart. The Vegans were leaving because they feared hegemony persecution without human protection. The Thraxians were departing because their government had forbidden them from associating with expelled humans. The collective members were returning home, rather than face isolation. Only the hegemony representatives seemed pleased with the situation. "Governor," his assistant reported, "the atmospheric processors are showing warning signs. Without the human technical teams, the other species don't have enough knowledge to maintain the complex systems." Mitchell nodded sadly. They had built something beautiful on Ceres Prime, but it required cooperation and trust to survive. With those elements gone, the dream was ending. Throughout Council space, the pattern repeated itself. Human medical teams finished treating patients before departing, leaving behind detailed instructions for continued care. Human engineers completed critical repairs on alien infrastructure, ensuring systems would function for months or years after their departure. Human teachers said goodbye to alien students, promising to continue their education through long-distance communication. Some humans made different choices. Dr. Karen White refused to leave the vegan hospital where she had worked for 15 years, choosing to give up her Earth citizenship rather than abandon her patients. Engineer Bill Murphy stayed behind to train local technicians on the water purification systems he had built, accepting exile from human space to ensure clean water would continue flowing. The exodus was not just about following orders or avoiding conflict. It was about maintaining the values that made humanity special, even when those values came at great personal cost. As the human ships gathered at the edges of Council space for their final departure, they carried with them not just people and possessions, but the hope that somewhere among the stars they could build something better than what they were leaving behind. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared into hyperspace, and Trade Administrator Zelkon stared at her computer screen with growing alarm. The numbers made no sense at first, but as she checked them again and again, the terrible truth became clear. Everything was falling apart. Her office on the Central Trade Station orbited the busy commercial world of Nexus Prime, where merchant ships from across the galaxy came to buy and sell goods. The massive windows showed the usual traffic of vessels coming and going, but something was different. The steady flow of commerce that had continued for decades was becoming chaotic and dangerous. "Administrator," her assistant called from the communication desk. "We have another report from the Outer Rim shipping lanes. 3 more merchant vessels attacked by pirates this week." Zelkon clicked her mandibles in frustration. The shipping routes that connected the far colonies to the central worlds had been safe for 20 years. Human patrol ships had quietly maintained order along those lonely stretches of space, asking for nothing in return except the right to trade freely. No one had paid much attention to their security work because it had seemed so routine. Now, with the human patrols gone, pirates were attacking merchant ships almost daily. The Council's own security forces were spread too thin across hundreds of systems to provide adequate protection. What had once been peaceful trade routes were becoming dangerous corridors where only the fastest or most heavily armed ships dared to travel. "What about the request for additional security patrols?" she asked. Her assistant checked the official channels. "The Defense Committee says they cannot spare any more ships. They are already operating at maximum capacity trying to cover the sectors that human forces used to patrol." Zelkon opened another report on her screen, this one from the Vegan cluster. The plague that human medical teams had helped contain was spreading again. Without the innovative treatment methods and medical supplies that humans had provided, the disease was killing thousands of people every day. The Vegan government was begging for help, but no other species had the advanced medical knowledge that humans had shared so freely. "The Agricultural Council is also requesting emergency assistance," her assistant continued. "The terraforming equipment on 12 colony worlds is beginning to fail." That news was particularly troubling. Human engineers had developed new terraforming techniques that could transform barren planets into garden worlds in just a few years instead of decades. They had shared these methods with anyone who needed them, asking only for raw materials in exchange. Now the complex atmospheric processors and soil conditioning systems were breaking down, and no one else fully understood how to repair them. On the mining world of Titan 7, Supervisor Hugh Core watched his production numbers drop for the 6th month in a row. His deep space mining operation had relied on human-designed equipment that could extract valuable minerals from the most difficult locations. The machines were incredibly efficient, but they required constant maintenance by engineers who understood their complex systems. "How long before we have to shut down completely?" he asked his chief technician. The technician, a member of the mechanical collective, ran calculations through his enhanced brain. "At current breakdown rates, we will lose 60% of our mining capacity within 1 year. Without human technical support, we cannot maintain the advanced extraction systems." Core had tried to hire engineers from other species, but none of them had experience with human technology. The humans had not deliberately made their equipment difficult to understand, but their innovative approaches were very different from traditional methods. They combined creativity with efficiency in ways that other species found hard to copy. Governor Paul Mitchell stood in his empty office on Ceres Prime, looking out at a world that was slowly dying. The atmospheric processors that maintained the planet's breathable air were showing red warning lights. The agricultural systems that fed millions of people were producing smaller harvests each month. The water treatment plants were running at reduced capacity. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Hegemony technical team has finished their assessment. They say it will take at least 5 years to fully understand the human systems, and another 10 years to train enough engineers to maintain them properly." Mitchell felt a deep sadness settle over him. Ceres Prime had been a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together. Now it was becoming a symbol of what happened when cooperation was replaced by suspicion and rigid thinking. The other species that had lived alongside humans were leaving the planet one by one. The Vegans departed first, fearing that they would become targets without human protection. The Thraxians followed, recalling their citizens to their home systems. The collective members returned to their structured society, unable to adapt to the increasing chaos. Only the hegemony representatives remained, and they were struggling to maintain even basic services. They had assumed that running a planet was simply a matter of giving orders and following procedures, but they were learning that human administration had involved constant problem-solving and creative adaptation. On the research station Deep Space Nine, Dr. Sarah Kim sealed the last of her laboratories before departing with the human evacuation fleet. She had spent 8 years developing new technologies in partnership with alien scientists, creating innovations that benefited everyone. Now her research would end because no other species was willing to continue the collaborative approach that had made their discoveries possible. "Dr. Kim," her Thraxian colleague said sadly, "our government has forbidden us from maintaining contact with human researchers. They say such cooperation was a sign of weakness." Kim packed her final experiment carefully into a transport container. "Science has no boundaries," she replied. "Truth doesn't care about politics. But I suppose some people have forgotten that." The pattern was repeating across the galaxy. Human peacekeepers had prevented wars between smaller species. Human traders had connected isolated worlds to galactic commerce. Human doctors had treated patients regardless of their species or ability to pay. Human teachers had educated children from dozens of different worlds. Human engineers had solved problems that others thought impossible. All of this work had been done quietly, without fanfare or demands for recognition. Humans had simply seen needs and filled them, built bridges, and crossed them, offered help and given it freely. They had become the invisible foundation that held civilized space together. Now that foundation was gone, and the cracks were spreading faster than anyone had expected. The Galactic Council had gotten exactly what they wanted, but they were beginning to realize that what they wanted and what they needed were very different things. In the growing silence where human voices had once offered solutions and assistance, the galaxy was learning just how much it had depended on the species it had cast out in shame. 1 year after humanity's departure, Chancellor Vextar stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council and felt something he had not experienced in centuries of political life: fear. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident discussions now felt empty and desperate, with several member species having withdrawn entirely from council participation. "The situation has become critical," he admitted to the assembled representatives, each word cutting against his pride like a sharp blade. "Our carefully maintained order is collapsing faster than our worst projections predicted." The holographic displays around the chamber showed the devastating statistics. Piracy attacks had increased by 300% along the major trade routes. 17 colony worlds were facing humanitarian crises without the medical and technical support that humans had quietly provided. The Kepler-Thraxian mining operation had lost 2 billion citizens when planetary earthquakes destroyed their underground cities, a disaster that human geological teams could have easily prevented with early warning systems. Arbiter Quindal, who had pronounced humanity's sentence with such certainty, now spoke with heavy reluctance, weighing down every word. "The data is undeniable. Human activities provided stability throughout our territories that we failed to recognize or appreciate. Their removal has created a power vacuum that our traditional governmental methods cannot adequately address." Council member Thrakvor shifted uncomfortably in his specialized chair. His insectoid species had been among the loudest voices calling for human expulsion, but now his own colonies were suffering without the agricultural innovations that human farmers had shared freely with anyone who asked. "Perhaps we acted too hastily," he suggested, though the admission clearly pained him. "The humans did violate our protocols, but their methods achieved results that our approaches have failed to replicate. The irony was becoming impossible to ignore. The very traits they had condemned in humanity were exactly what Council space now desperately needed. Human willingness to act quickly in emergencies, their disregard for bureaucratic procedures when lives were at stake, their tendency to help anyone regardless of political complications. All of these behaviors that had seemed so disruptive were proving to be essential for maintaining galactic civilization. Trade Administrator Zelkhan presented her latest reports to the Assembly. "Commercial shipping has decreased by 40%. Many merchant companies are refusing to travel routes that human patrols once protected. The economic impact is spreading to every sector of Council space." The numbers painted a grim picture. The Titan Collective was struggling to maintain their massive mining operations without human engineering expertise. Their advanced extraction equipment was breaking down faster than they could repair it, and their attempts to hire replacement technicians from other species had failed completely. No one else understood the innovative approaches that humans had developed. "The core worlds are reporting food shortages," Zelkhan continued. "The agricultural systems that humans optimized are producing 30% less food than before their departure. Traditional farming methods cannot match the efficiency of human techniques. Even the proud hegemony was quietly bleeding resources as they desperately tried to fill the gaps that humanity had left behind. Their military forces were stretched thin, attempting to patrol space lanes that human ships had covered with just a fraction of the personnel. Their bureaucratic approach to problem-solving was proving inadequate for the rapid response that crisis situations required. "We must consider the possibility of reconciliation," suggested Council Member Drexhigh, though speaking the words seemed to physically pain him. "Perhaps if we approached them with a modified proposal, some form of limited readmission to Council space under carefully controlled conditions." But even as they debated potential solutions, intelligence reports were painting an increasingly troubling picture. Humanity had not simply retreated to their soul system to recover from the humiliation of expulsion. Instead, they were expanding again, but in an entirely different direction that completely bypassed Council authority. Our long-range sensors have detected human exploration fleets moving toward the galactic rim, reported Intelligence Director Kavlon. They are making contact with species that we have never encountered, establishing trade relationships and mutual defense agreements completely outside our sphere of influence. The implications were staggering. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had assumed that any species seeking to participate in interstellar civilization would eventually have to work through their established systems. The idea that someone might simply ignore them and build alternative networks had never seriously been considered. "How many new species have they contacted?" asked Arbiter Quindal. "At least 47 confirmed first contacts in the past 6 months," Kavlon replied. "Our analysts believe they may have encountered twice that number. They are building relationships with civilizations that have resources and capabilities we know nothing about." The reports described vast trading networks emerging beyond Council space, with humans serving as intermediaries between species that had never known about each other's existence. Advanced technologies were being shared freely among these new alliances, creating innovations that surpassed anything the Council had achieved through their careful, regulated approach. "More disturbing," Kavlon continued, "is evidence that several Council member species are secretly establishing communication with these new human alliances. They appear to be exploring options for alternative trade and defense relationships." Chancellor Vextar felt his political foundation crumbling beneath him. The hegemony's power had always been based on their position as the dominant force within Council space. But if other species had alternatives, their leverage would disappear completely. "What are they offering that we cannot provide?" he demanded. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Meltar, a vegan scientist who had once worked alongside human researchers, stood to address the assembly. She had been granted special permission to speak as an expert witness on human methods. "They offer partnership instead of hierarchy," she said simply. "When humans encountered problems, they looked for solutions. When they found solutions, they shared them. When other species needed help, humans provided it without demanding payment or political concessions. They treated every species as equals, capable of contributing something valuable." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council system was built on careful balance of power, complex hierarchies, and elaborate procedures that ensured established species maintained their advantages. Humans had offered something completely different, a system based on mutual benefit and cooperative problem-solving. "By the time we realized our mistake," Dr. Meltar concluded, "humanity had already found something better than our approval. They had found their own path among the stars, and they had invited others to walk it with them." As the emergency session ended without any concrete solutions, Chancellor Vexitar understood that they had not simply expelled a troublesome member species. They had driven away the foundation of a new kind of civilization, one that other species were now choosing over the traditional order that the Council represented. The galaxy was changing, and they were being left behind. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood in the observation lounge of Luna Station, watching the construction of humanity's newest deep space explorer through the massive transparent walls. The ship was enormous, designed for multi-generational voyages that would carry humans and their allies to galaxies beyond the Milky Way. Its sleek hull gleamed under the artificial lights as robotic workers attached the final components of its revolutionary faster-than-light drive. Behind him, the central plaza of the station hummed with activity and conversation in dozens of languages. Humans moved among their new allies with easy familiarity, sharing meals and ideas with species the Galactic Council had never even heard of. Vegan refugees worked alongside Thraxian scientists who had chosen exile over complicity with their government's rigid policies. Reformed hegemony dissidents taught their engineering knowledge to anyone willing to learn, finally free to use their skills for creation rather than conquest. "Sir," Commander Kate Phillips approached with a diplomatic pouch sealed with the official symbols of the Galactic Council. We have received another formal request for a meeting. This is the 7th one in 3 months. They are asking to discuss what they call mutual interests and shared benefits. Morrison took the ornate document and scanned the flowery language that barely concealed the council's growing desperation. Every phrase had been carefully chosen to avoid admitting fault while begging for humanity's return. 3 separate trade delegations had already attempted to approach human space unofficially, offering increasingly generous terms for renewed cooperation. All had been politely turned away at the border. "What should I tell them this time?" Phillips asked, though she already knew the answer. Morrison looked out at the stars visible beyond the station's protective shields. In the distance, he could see the navigation lights of ships preparing for departure to the Andromeda Galaxy, where human exploration teams had already established contact with civilizations that valued cooperation over control. The reports from those missions described worlds where different species worked together as equals, sharing knowledge and resources without the complex hierarchies that defined Council space. "Tell them we are occupied with other commitments," he said simply. "We have found new friends to talk with, and our schedule is quite full." In the depths of space, human ships continued their steady exodus not just from Council territory, but from the entire local galactic region. They carried with them refugee populations from a dozen species, advanced technologies that surpassed anything the Council possessed, and most importantly, the promise of a different kind of civilization, built on mutual aid rather than mutual exploitation. The results of humanity's new approach were already becoming visible across the galaxy. The Wanderers, a nomadic species that had been ignored by the Council for centuries, had eagerly joined human exploration fleets after learning about their inclusive philosophy. Their natural ability to navigate through dangerous space phenomena made them invaluable partners for long-range missions. The collective, tired of their rigid mechanical society, had sent thousands of volunteers to work with human research teams. Their enhanced computational abilities combined with human creativity produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Together, they developed new medical treatments, improved space travel technology, and created art that expressed the beauty of cooperation across species barriers. The free traders, who had been marginalized by Council regulations that favored large commercial interests, found new prosperity in human space where small entrepreneurs were encouraged and supported. Their network spread news of human achievements to the farthest corners of the galaxy, attracting more species to consider alternatives to Council membership. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic scientist, presented her latest report to the Human Assembly on Earth. "Our new alliances have produced technological advances that exceed our most optimistic projections," she announced to the gathered representatives. "The joint research projects with our partners have solved energy distribution problems, developed new methods for terraforming hostile worlds, and created communication systems that work across galactic distances." The assembly chamber buzzed with excitement as she displayed images from the new territories. Thriving colonies where multiple species lived in harmony, research stations where scientists from different worlds collaborated on projects that benefited everyone, and defensive networks that protected peaceful civilizations from aggressive neighbors without relying on threats or intimidation. "Most significantly," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "we have established the foundation for what our partners are calling the Cooperative Alliance. 43 species have already signed the charter, committing to shared governance, mutual defense, and open exchange of knowledge and resources. Meanwhile, in Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. Chancellor Vextar found himself addressing emergency sessions almost weekly as more problems emerged from humanity's absence. The latest crisis involved the complete collapse of the interstellar communication network that humans had maintained throughout the outer territories. "Without human technical expertise, we cannot repair the quantum relay stations," reported the Chief of Communications. Long-range messages between distant colonies now take months to transmit instead of hours. The communication breakdown was affecting everything from trade negotiations to emergency response coordination. Colonies under attack by pirates could not call for help quickly enough. Medical emergencies on remote worlds went unresolved because doctors could not consult with specialists on other planets. Scientific discoveries made in one location took so long to reach other researchers that important opportunities for collaboration were missed. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "we have confirmed that 12 more member species have begun secret negotiations with the Human Cooperative Alliance. They are exploring the possibility of leaving Council space entirely." Vextar felt his grip on power slipping away like sand through his fingers. The hegemony's dominance had been built on the assumption that smaller species needed their protection and guidance. Now those same species were finding alternatives that offered genuine partnership instead of benevolent tyranny. As he reviewed the intelligence reports, Vexatar realized that humanity had accomplished something the Council had never imagined possible. They had made the established order irrelevant by creating a better one. Species throughout the galaxy were no longer asking for permission to improve their lives or seek new opportunities. They were simply leaving to join civilizations that welcomed their contributions. The last human transmission received by Council monitoring stations had been brief and direct. "To any who seek a different way forward, you know where to find us. The galaxy is vast, and there is room for all who choose cooperation over control." Chancellor Vextar would later write in his private memoirs, never published during his lifetime, "We believed we were removing a disruptive element from our perfect system. Instead, we discovered that our system was only perfect because of the disruption they provided." By the time we realized our mistake, humanity had found something better than our approval. They had found their own path among the stars, and they had shown others that such a path was possible. Silently, humanity had walked away from the galaxy that rejected them. And in their silence, the Council finally understood the true magnitude of their shame. They had not just lost valuable allies, they had lost the future itself.